Hello and welcome to my channel. I picked up this very cheap toy pirate pistol, which is a flintlock pistol from around 400 years ago, and I want to make it look a little bit more realistic. So let's open the packaging and check it out. Straight out of the bag, this thing is very light. The air quote wooden part is made up of two halves, while the chrome pieces consist of about 7 or 8 parts, and those are clipped into place throughout the pistol. And a lot of these parts are very loose and barely holding on, and the flintlock mechanism itself doesn't even work, as it's supposed to pull back and click into place. So it looks like I've got my work cut out for me if I'm going to turn this into something looking more realistic. So folks, take one last look before I strip it all down. There's only 5 main screws holding this all together, and they're all Phillips heads. Everything else is simply clipped into place. The biggest problem I had were the two halves of the wooden handle wouldn't come apart, and I really didn't want to risk breaking it, as this could risk weakening its overall infrastructure. Plus this was also holding in place the trigger mechanism, and with my limited mechanical skills I wanted to leave that alone. So after a lot of wiggling and teasing, I get the remaining parts out, and this is what I ended up with. There are a couple of made in China markings embedded into the plastic. So first off, they need filing down, and this plastic is very smooth, and because we're going to paint it, we need to rough it up a little bit so the paint has something to adhere to. And I find that the sanding sponge is perfect for this job. Since the trigger is going to be a different colour to the rest of the pistol, I need to mask this off, and that will allow me to paint it separately. Next, I can get this guy primed. If I had a bigger spray area, I could do all this in one go, but I don't, so I have to let it dry, turn it around and spray it again. And then once it's dried, I give it an all over light sanding, and once again this just gives me a base to work from so that I can spray on the actual colour, which is a medium brown. So I make sure I get good coverage first before moving on to create the wood grain texture. Because the paint is glossy, I need to sand it down a little bit, and I go over just light enough to scuff up the surface. To create the wood grain effect, I'm going to use a mixture of 2 or 3 different colours, and I start off by giving it an overbrush in cream, making sure that they follow mostly the same direction. And because it's an overbrush, I'm not getting too much paint on it each time. And I repeat the same process, but this time using a black paint, as basically you need to go lighter and darker than your base colour. And then lastly, I mix up a couple of different shades of brown for a bit of variety, and then after giving it a spray with some matte sealer to protect the paint, I can take off the masking tape. It's going to be easier to paint this trigger by hand, so I cover it in primer, and then that's followed up by a coat of gunmetal. And now I can move on to preparing the remainder of the metal components, and that involves filing down the seam lines and scraping off as much of the chrome as possible. This doesn't have to be too perfect, as the metal work back in those days was a bit rough anyway. I realise that there's one remaining screw, so I'll remove that. Off camera, I'm going to prime all these pieces, then I'm going to spray them in gunmetal. Next, I'm going to give them a black wash, and this shoe polish is perfect for that. It's just a matter of covering all the surfaces, and then using the tissue, dabbing off all the excess from the raised areas. That way the polish will only remain in the sunken areas, and this will make the metal look old and dirty, but it will take a little while to dry. For the highlights, I like to use some silver rub and buff, and this is a wax based polish. So all I need to do is rub a little bit on the end of a tissue or cloth, and then gently rub it onto the raised areas of the pieces. And this final step really brings the metal to life. So off camera I sprayed everything with a matte sealer, and now I'm ready to crack on with the assembly, making sure not to scratch any paint in the meantime. Once the trigger guard is in place, I can start to add the screws, and this will bring both halves together. lot of these parts are slot together with the aid of a little bit of glue. With them being made out of thin, cheap plastic, they are quite badly warped. So it's just a matter of getting them as secured as I possibly can. I have a little bit more reassurance on the parts that require screws, although some of the parts simply just clip into place. I saved the most complicated section until last, and that is the cocking mechanism, and this comprises of two moving parts. This part at the front contains the powder, and when the flint hits this, it causes a spark which fires the gun. The cocking mechanism containing the flint goes on next, and this needs lining up with the gears which are connected to the trigger, and then it's held in place with a screw, although if it's too tight it will not fire at all, and we can give that a quick test. And the cocking mechanism has two settings, half and full, and this is where the saying going off half cocked comes from. I just need to dirty up these screws as they look too pristine, and that's this toy pirate pistol completed into a realistic prop. Naturally it doesn't actually fire, but at least it looks the part, and it certainly won't look out of place amongst your prop collection. I think the only thing I could do to improve this further would be to add some more decorational plates to cover up the screw holes, and I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. Converting props like this is ideal to help boost film, TV and theatre productions, as well as for cosplays and reenactment events, and should not be waved carelessly around in public, because nobody else will know that this is just a toy. And this is how it looks next to a genuine replica, and to me that doesn't look out of place. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, if I can do it, so can you.